Hi, and welcome to Diversity Plus. Diversity Plus is the part of Indie Plus that will be exploring the issues that minority gamers face in a meaningful way by showcasing upcoming designers, discussing subjects in depth, and having a lot of fun playing games. Tonight we'll be discussing some of the basic issues that gamers of color face. Please note that this event upholds the Indie Plus community standards. To find out more about those standards, head to our website at indieplus.org. I am Sarah Richardson, and I am your moderator for tonight. I do illustration, layout, and game design. My co-moderator is James Mendez Hodes. I just said your last name wrong. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's totally fine. I actually just found out my grandfather pronounced it Hodes.
So I was taking a cue from your grandfather because I remember you telling me about that, or
Yeah,
so I'm going to claim. And Mendez, could you please introduce yourself?
What's good? I'm Mendez. I write RPGs for a living. My side job is also writing RPGs, and my side job from that is I run RPGs for little kids and then make fun of them on the internet. And my upper lip is scratched up right now because my martial arts instructor forgot to clip his nails, and I'm really self-conscious about that. So you guys have to stare at my face now.
Well, like I didn't notice it before, but now that you bring it up.
Oh, great. Good. I did a good job there. Excellent. Go me.
So tonight, like I said, we're going to be discussing issues that gamers of color may face. And so tonight we have a couple of guests with us. Andre, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is André La Roche. I recently returned to the game design scene. I've done some work for Magpie Press, specifically their Fate Codex, and I have an article pretty soon too.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And next up, we have Dev.
Hey, my name is Dev. Purkayastha. I've been into role-playing games for a while and playing them a bunch. I've published one standalone game and released a few hacks of other existing small press games, and just a great fan of them. Also into tech stuff and music nerd stuff too. Also my things.
Thank you. And finally, we have Julia.
Hi, my name is Julia. I have not actually been playing games very long, since maybe 2006, and I've written and published a game and extra parts of other games. I write a lot of LARPs, and of late I'm at grad school and working on my teacher licensure for special education, so that's sort of been taking up quite a bit of my time.
Cool.
Very cool. Now, before we talk about how being a gamer of color can sometimes, I believe, make you feel a little different than what is presented as the majority of gamers, first let's talk about something that we can all get behind, which is tell me about the first character you ever made. Andre, if you want to start us off.
Yeah. The first character I ever made was shortly after discovering Dragonlance and being very...
Yes! Dragonlance!
and being very inspired by Raceland Magier to create a wizard who wanted to basically become a god, and unfortunately that didn't play as well in game as it did in books. And so my character was very shortly lived.
I have to ask, did the other players kill your character out of curiosity?
I think it's probably a secret vote, and they told the GM that they'd be okay with me, with losing the wizard from the party.
I shouldn't laugh, but I love everything about that story. Dev, do you have a character you'd like to tell us about?
I definitely do. The fun answer than the substantive one. So my very first character for Star Wars RPG, I was into the Beatles, so it was a sort of plant person named Jonas Lanona, And then we fell asleep, and I didn't have anything else other than a character named Jonas Lenona. That's what I was like, this is clever and great. More substantively, the first real game I played, being a D&D campaign, I rolled up well, we needed a cleric, and I didn't know what that was, and now I did. So I was a cleric who just tried to help, and who's a half-elf caught between cultures, who's chaotic good and tries to do the good thing, but also just mess around. And that's been roughly my character in most every RPG. I've branched out a bit, but that's really so much the prototype for the character, or every NPC I even try to play.
I see nothing wrong with that. Sometimes sticking with an archetype can be very comforting. So I definitely feel you there. And what about you, Julia?
So the first character I ever made was for Primetime Adventures, and we played Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8. And my character was the hellhole had opened up in Cleveland, I think, and no, it was post Katrina, and all the monsters had evacuated New Orleans, and my character was Miss Dinguette, who was the daughter of a vampire, blah blah blah, and she was a witch, and she was really cool. Like, it was like I could have, just thrown her into the actual Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and no one would have noticed.
That sounds like a lot of fun, actually, and it's interesting that you brought like real life events into it.
Yeah.
So that is pretty cool.
I mean, what happens to vampires when all the crypts are flooded?
I like this. Okay, I will stop before you and I just spend the hour talking about vampires and flooded crypts, although that would also be fun. So I made a bit of a reference to this, but typically the gaming community is presented as overwhelmingly white. I'm not going to state whether or not that's true, but I am aware that the fiction that we're presented with, the art we're presented with, all of that is presented as overwhelmingly Caucasian. So what has your experience been at a table whenever you're the only person of color at that table? And whoever wants to go first, you're all kind of staring at me blankly, and I can't see Andre.
My there's also staring blankly too. So.
Well, is there any experience you'd like to tell us about?
I mean, I don't think there's been any like real standout, grab my smelling salts and the fainting couch incident. But yeah, I'd say my own personal experiences have been that most of the groups I've gamed with have been overwhelmingly Caucasian. And when it's a one-shot game at a convention, that can kind of get a little interesting, where someone makes sort of very slightly racial things joke, not in a way that isn't overtly racist. Then there's also sort of a moment of the stop and look and say, okay, how's he going to react? And I see by nodding heads, it looks like other people on this panel have had that experience too.
I actually think that I want to say, it's cool for me to jump in, like the thing of where innocuously things that test that line come up in gaming is interesting, because it's not even explicitly, not even people trying to be explicitly problematic. That's another category. But it seems like the stuff that's involved in a lot of tabletop gaming seems to trip that wire in a sort of strange way. If we were just people just getting together to watch movies, I feel, well, maybe it would happen as often. Anyway, yeah, I've seen that happen where it just sort of comes up, especially with the only person at the table.
I worry sometimes that when I'm in that situation, I sit down and okay, so I'm the only person of color, and someone takes a guess at what my race is internally, hopefully not out actually at the table, and then maybe everyone just editing out all of the things they would have otherwise said about Asians or Hispanics because I'm there, and like because when I think back about experiences being the only person of color at the table, I can't think of very many where something came up having to do with my ethnicity, but I can remember a lot of things having to do with other ethnicities which were not represented at the table. Like, okay, it's safe to talk about Indians.
Yeah, I think I've experienced something very similar, and I have really attributed it to just having started playing role-playing games when I was in my 30s, and I could be a lot more picky about who I played with, and I was playing with people that knew me very, very well. At a couple of conventions, mostly LARP conventions, I've encountered weird crap. One I can think of in particular, there was a guy who was imitating a really awful, awful Japanese accent, sort of like the Jerry Lewis version of a Japanese accent. And it was sort of like, ooh, and in a LARP, because you can sort of jump around from circles, I just decided I wasn't going to hang out with him and didn't have any reason to interact with him. And I've seen that happen to other people where someone comes in and is really doing something, dressed really in a racist way, like a caricature. But other than that, even though I've often been the only person of color, I have to say that my more negative experiences outside of just playing tabletop have been being the only woman at the table, and even then, I play mostly with women anyway. But I was at a convention one time, and we were sort of doing like a public game, and I was playing Emma. What is her name from X-Men? Emma Frost. And this guy kept holding up images of Emma Frost in corsets and Emma Frost looking really hot. And he's like, "Yeah, you're playing this Emma Frost." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm actually not." And then really went out of his way. Huh? What's that?
Just imagine, like, thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, I was like, I actually was not imagining I was dressed like that way, but no. And then after, he went out of his way to come up to me and show me yet another like Playboy bunny version of Emma Frost, and I was like, yeah, no. And I think at that point I was like, that's really rude. And I just kind of walked away.
That sounds horrific. It really does. That's pretty cringeworthy.
It was laughable. It made me uncomfortable, and I told him, and I was like, I'm done, bye, thanks. So, yeah.
But yeah, I can certainly see, since whenever I'm at a gaming table, whenever I'm the only woman, I will get comments occasionally that are problematic. Do you, actually, let me change tack there. Because it sounds like you're all saying that there seems to be, it's obviously normally not outright, except for maybe really terrible accents. And so you're talking about a more subtle form of racism that comes up at the table. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I kind of think of it as sort of the Archer racism, if you're familiar with that show, where there's usually one or two characters who will make really horrifically offensive racial joke, and it feels like producers having their cake and eating too, like, ha ha ha, look how horrible these racists are, but guess what, we're still laughing at a racist joke. And it's it's kind of has that sort of vibe where the players will make racially tinged jokes in a way that's supposed to come across as ironic and self-effacing, but then it's still a racial joke.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how that would be super uncomfortable.
I've also experienced there is no race here. So if I'm imagining that my character is a person of color and
your hand gesture was really clear. You just wiped it away.
Right. Yeah, it's like,
gone.
but in my head, my character maybe looks more like me than not. and then someone may make the assumption that my character is white. So I think I've noticed more of the erasure than and that's kind of hard to, I think in other people's minds their characters may look a lot like them, and so by default other people's characters look like them, like in that same way that we look at pictures of Jesus, and a European imagery of Jesus is blonde hair and blue eyes and nice silky long hair. So I think of that almost as like the Jesus syndrome of role-playing, that if your character is a person of color and you don't have any other indicators other than just you're being you, and you are saying, you're not using a funny accent, you're not saying that they're dressed in a particular way, they're just like some person who just happens to be a person of color, then everybody is still going to assume that, well, there are no people of color who are anything other than caricatures or have very, very distinct ethnic qualifiers, I guess. And otherwise, everybody's white.
Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of what came up while you were talking. Like, do you find yourself describing your character's race in a way that the white players you're with do not?
Sometimes.
That's fair.
Yeah. and sometimes
Sarah, could you just repeat that question once more?
I was asking if our panelists found that they described their character's race in a way that white players may not like even mention it because it's just assumed.
If it's okay if I do. I think maybe I'm very slightly more likely to go ahead and offer it as a detail in a very brief, awkward way. But when I'm playing with a group where I don't especially know them, I'm also paying attention to like, what are the microcultural, like, what's the ways that this group of people does it? Like, what's okay? The archer, like, sort of the archer thing. So is this group, are these people I'm worried about? Are these well-meaning people who like make archerish like jokes that I don't love, but see where they're from, or do they have different standards? So I quickly try to feel out where people are at. So if I throw out like, oh, I'm an elf who, if I guess would be cast with Asian features or something, are people going to freak? Or they're like, oh yeah, I'll do that. I've been at tables where everyone else just offered like, oh, here's the racial identity stuff to help visualize, and everyone was like explicitly being like, yeah, that's a feature of humans, and that was comfortable. But I sometimes just follow the lead or just see where the group's culture is at if it's a new group of people.
I find that character names are sometimes a point of contention. If I bring a character who's not white to the table, okay, sometimes people just ignore it, and maybe that's better than the alternative. If I bring a character who's not white, who has a hard-to-pronounce name, that's going to start problems, because everyone's going to start mispronouncing it, and then they're going to start mispronouncing it on purpose.
Yeah, I think, especially in long gaming, which tends to be very sort of Eurocentric, if it's, say, a published setting and there's not some sort of explicit analog to non-European continents and countries, there's definitely pushback, like, people like that don't exist in this world. I'm like, is that wishful thinking on your part, or?
Ooh, that's an excellent comeback to that kind of reaction.
I mean, it's just that we're all sitting around already playing in the fictional world. What does it say? Why is it straining credibility to include individuals who, fall outside more like, preaching to the choir on this panel?
Yes.
I find pictures helpful. So in the past few games I've played, after the first or second session, the players have found pictures, because the internet has lots of pictures, of people who, like, if this were a movie, this is who my character would be played by, and that often becomes a very easy way to just say, yes, my character was a person of color, without having to go into all the detail. Like, this is who it is. You know this person, and this person is familiar to you. And that isn't always possible, but I found that's been kind of helpful.
Now, I'm curious. It sounds like we've all had experiences with sort of subtle or implicit racism. But has anyone had experiences where there was someone who clearly was incredibly problematic and explicit about it, or is the kind of culture that we've all been exposed to just one where, because everyone's absorbed lots of problematic entertainment, that just kind of seeps in by osmosis to the way they game too?
I think that maybe the closest is to something more explicit. If someone, if someone is showing values, there are ones that kind of feel strange when they mirror real world ones. So I'll say, like, most of the D&D games I play, people have humanized like all species, and it's really weird because it's like, well, is it an analog or is it not? It's unclear. But yeah, most groups I played with don't do weird, heinous stuff, but I know that some groups do. So once in a while, you trip over like the tendency in the fiction to just dehumanize people, and it's not targeted at me, but it's assumption. I actually remember playing some 4th edition RPGA, and I had a half-orc guy who was like my favorite character ever, and most tables were like, all right, great, you have multiple swords, fantastic. And sometimes people were like, oh, wait a minute, like, how can you be in an adventure with us? And what values were implicit? And it was never, it still has mostly been good, but I'd say the biggest case has been those cases where, like, the values they have, the values represented in the story are ones that feel strange.
Playing with strangers on the internet has been a great place for me to see outright heinous racism. I don't do this very much anymore, but back when I played on like the White Wolf unmoderated chats, a good 1 in 3 characters would be a terrifying racial caricature. Usually of an Asian character. There were a lot of strange ninjas and samurai and white people who had ended up as samurai somehow. And I always played a black character on that particular thing, and occasionally people would just outright complain about black people.
Wow.
Yep.
I think I've really been blessed. I have not really seen outright racism at the table. Although several years ago, when Steal Away Jordan came out, where you play a black person who's a slave, somebody really wanted to, and I can't remember if this was in a forum or how this came about, because
it was Chauncey DeVega on We Are Respectable Negroes.
Oh yeah, there was that one. Yeah, well, he didn't like the game. But whenever I play the game, I would play the game at a con. One of the first things I would say is that I don't care what life was actually like. We don't use the N-word at my table. If I'm running this game for you, we don't use the N-word. And I can't remember if this was in person or on a forum that somebody really wanted to make the point that it absolutely had to be in there, that anytime you play this game, you had to have the freedom to use the N-word. And I was like, are you serious?
What?
And at some point I just said, well, just don't let me be at your table, because my rule is that you don't use it. And for that particular case, to me, it's just something that I don't say. I don't like it, and I know that there are plenty of African Americans who totally embrace it and would be okay with it. And so for me, it's really a personal thing. Like, this is my game, and I'm running this game, or I'm playing this game, and I'm just putting it up front. You may have where your line is, mine is that this is not language that we use.
Right. You establish your boundaries. Like, people should respect that. I know, like, as badly as I want to play Steal Away Jordan, I know I wouldn't be comfortable using that language in the game. So, although I understand it's a different context for me, But I'm kind of it always bugs me when I hear of people arguing with the creators over something like that.
Yeah,
It's like, ah,
you can
oh,
take it where you want. Just know that wasn't the intention.
totally. I think that does provide us a good time to segue into um, what games have you played that have done a good job of portraying characters of color, if any? I'm hoping there's some. And feel free to talk about your own projects. So we do have Steal Away Jordan.
Yeah, I guess it portrays black people okay. Um, I think, and with that, I will add that a lot of times it depends on the players, and having a game that either that doesn't erase having some diversity in it, doesn't just disregard that, is helpful. Um, I'm not always certain that having it be very explicit that you're playing people of color, except for my game, I guess. But is always helpful. But yes, if it's a theme, that's great. And if it's a theme that was done with love and with good information and without trying to make caricatures, then yes. Right now I'm playing Urban Shadows, and at first I was a little like, you just basically put your ethnicity and as your look, and that at first gave me this feeling like, ugh, as somebody who looks kind of ethnically ambiguous, it was hard for me to pick. And I think of, I get mistaken for all kinds of ethnicities. But as we've been playing it, it's actually been quite enjoyable to be specifically a person from a particular place who has a specific ethnicity, even if that is somewhat ambiguous or even and mixed. So I would say that yes, and I was skeptical at first, but I'm enjoying it.
Excellent. All right. How about you, Andre?
My own gaming tends to a lot more mainstream traditional RPGs, which they tend to try and take the sort of colorblind approach to these issues. I think, as problematic as that is, I think though that as a general trend, I've been happier with at least the art representations, because amongst that, D&D, Pathfinder, amongst a lot of the larger lines, I do see increasing representation in the characters that are depicted in the books, whereas when I started gaming back in the mid to late 90s, it was the predominant character art was all Caucasian.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Based compared to whenever I started gaming, where it was all the art was white men. Like now we have all different kinds of art in games. It's fantastic.
It's interesting to have seen it. Like I feel like I've seen it get better, which is cool. And definitely in the games that are mainstream-ish or have an art budget, like Pathfinder and 5th edition and 4th just got better. Mostly, yeah. No, yeah, they got better. Period.
Now, Dev, are there any other games that you've maybe played that where race is a part of the game that you felt that they were doing it really well?
I'm blanking a bit. I'm going to mention two things that maybe I like a lot that do something interesting or are cool. So, Worldwide Wrestling RPG by Nathan Paoletta.
Yes.
Which I really love. I was not to spend the rest of the time talking about wrestling. Professional wrestling has an interesting. It has a literally problematic relationship with race, but it's also there, all throughout it. So it has to be there. So the art it represents a bunch of different people, and I like it. It passed the test of the art shows someone of multiple different backgrounds. I'm like, yes, I want to be that person, and also this person. Also, the art did the interesting thing of it showed, and this is the thing which you could actually debate whether this was a good move or not. But it showed art of like here's a person of this ethnicity, and they're in a problematic role, and you realize like, oh, that's something that would happen in actual pro wrestling, and so it sort of addresses all of that, I think. Basically, the use of art to prime these ideas, like, hey, do you want to talk about what it's like if you have a character like The Rock, who, how much is their identity a part of the thing, or how do you feel about when a Samoan character is told to act like a sumo wrestler for 10 years, etc. But also just like great heroic figures, like here's the people's champion, and it's simply just a picture of this like athletic black woman who clearly deserves to win everything all the time, and just so yeah. Anyway, you can see how I got excited. It was some really great art direction, and I liked it a lot.
No, that's a good point, and I would assume that Nathan, because he does like to address those things pretty subtly in his games, so I know that that was important to him whenever he was directing the art. So that's interesting, because I know also in his last Kickstarter he has the luchador character, which, you know, I'm not sure if luchadors are. I assume luchadors could potentially be problematic, but I also know I love watching them wrestle. So
Yeah. I mean, I think a good assumption with wrestling is like it'll very quickly get problematic, but yeah, actually about race, like luchador, like it's not a colorblind. It's not like a colorblind topic of like, oh, here's sometimes you put on a mask and you flip around. Like no, it is like a Mexican art form, and that's going to be infused, and so it's there to talk about.
awesome. Well, I do want to check, because overall it sounds like what I'm getting from this is so much depends on the people you're playing with. But I am curious if you have happened to run across any games that were terrible dumpster fires about race, and if you'd be interested in talking about them.
If I have, I repressed the memory.
It's a good survival tactic.
That's fair. That's fair. We definitely don't have to talk about the more negative side of it. I just did want to broach it with you guys in case there were any of that experiences, even scrubbed of the name of the game, that you wanted to talk about.
I'm going to go with Andre's answer too, and add to that if I'm looking for a game, I will flip through the art, and if the art is so incredibly homogenous that it just isn't going to work for me, then I'm not going to invest in time or money. So I think getting yes, they're out there. I'm quite certain that they're out there, and they go past my radar, and if they even get close, I select out. I opt out.
So, yes, please.
I'll mention one that I experienced with James. There was a LARP I remember, and it was written by some non-U.S. folks portraying a high school experience that seems like it was U.S. based. It was a pretty good LARP. I had a good time. It's for one character.
I enjoyed it.
Was it play the cards?
It was play the cards. I liked it. Good LARP. Mendez's character seemed to combine like a bunch, like someone shook together all of like, if all you knew about the 90s was I watched few 90s episodes, if all about you know what I'm saying, basically I watched some 90s episodes and they're like, oh, here's a black person, they do all these things, and it was Mendez and he was the one black person. Yeah. And I was like, yeah. And I'm actually glad you played it. It was like,
thank you. Yes.
It was as no, you did a great job, and the weird parts were shaved away.
Yeah, there were that character intersected with a lot of in that overtly the character was about hip hop and was about having a very particular, very teenage relationship with hip hop, which it was partly coded as black, partly coded. It read to me very clearly as a young man who is not black but would very much like to be, and that very much informed the way that I played him and the kind of immaturity that I brought to the role.
Yeah, and the text seemed to have gone both ways. I'm sorry, I'm laughing about it. Anyway,
Yeah.
it was an uncomfortable character to read. All right, I guess stop.
Yeah. Then there were that was also the LARP with there were 3 or 4 Muslim characters, I think.
I thought just two.
Um,
I also wanted
but,
yeah, and that
yeah.
sometimes can be weird. I also want to say with credit, like they're writing either about the U.S. as non-U.S. people or whichever, and they explicitly coded a bunch of different cultures. You have to get some things wrong to do better. So
Yeah, they definitely tried hard, and there were many good things about that.
oh yeah,
Needed maybe a little more work, but
yeah.
good try.
One of my favorite LARP experiences I played relatively recently. It got me to play more LARPs more recently, so that's not terrible. But it struck out as like I felt briefly terrible before we started role playing.
I played that a couple of years ago, and I watched bad things happen with that. So there was a character who was supposed to be from India, and the player showed up. It wasn't pretty. It was really offensive, and
I've heard about this guy and this run. This is legendary.
yeah, and it was offensive. There was a Muslim character, and before we started, I actually did her hijab for her. So,
this is why you need to have diverse players to fix these problems.
Exactly, and I didn't do a very good job of it because I haven't worn a hijab in a long time. But I at least I said, oh, here, let me make this look somewhat authentic for you. And I'm used to doing it myself, so I totally screwed it up. But she looked authentically screwed up. And I played the queen, and I played a black girl. So in my own little bubble, it was great. But I observed some bad things happening in that. But it was a really fun LARP.
So I guess kind of on the topic of LARPs, and this is something that's really been bugging me for a long time, is and it's also cosplay too, but people who are playing drow because the makeup goes on and no, I'm a drow, yeah, but you're in blackface.
Yeah, let's talk about drows. Let's go ahead and go there.
Oh,
and so obviously we should differentiate. There are people who dress up as drow elves who wear blackface, who put black makeup on, and then there are people who do drow and wear purple makeup. So any thoughts on this particular cosplay tradition? Because there are people who will tell you it is tradition, they're not black.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Because there's easier cosplay. I mean, no, if someone says, hi, I'm white dressed, like, okay, good, that's fine. That you avoided a terrible circumstance and you have two scimitars?
Two scimitars, a panther. Oh, I'm gonna stop. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. So just say like you don't need to go that last mile. It'll be okay. That's my feeling. Because it's so obvious to possibly get wrong. I guess. Okay, I'm not maybe. Like there might be a color like a skin tone color you can use that doesn't feel wrong. Like light blue Navi paint, a la Avatar. That might not code wrong in American society. But you're playing with fire, and there's probably a better costume. And then there's people who just do straight up like blackface. So I guess Andre, you've seen that at conventions or before?
Okay, at conventions, at LARPs, it's for me the interesting thing is there's just such sort of sincerity and innocence in voice. No, I'm just playing a drow. This is just how drow look. And at that point, I have a hard time channeling anger because it's clear that the person I'm talking to just does not. But the issue is flying miles above their head, and seeing how it's really, very much tied to an incredibly horrific racist practice from the last century. And I guess I don't know how to deal with it at that point when it's just they see this firm divide between dressing up as a drow and then Al Jolson in blackface.
I'm really conflicted about drow, and I think if you want to go there, I don't know if there's really any good excuse not to ask yourself, if you're an American, you're going to dress up as a drow, how can you not ask yourself, how do I make this costume and not make it look blackface in any way, shape, or form, so that I am not in any way misunderstood, that I may have the best of intentions? Is there some way I can do this so that if any random person came up to me, they would say, oh, you're a drow and you're not in blackface? Like, it's actually not that hard, because there are lots of colors out there that are not blackface. Gray or purple. I think there are different ways to do it, and at some point, intention is really not an excuse. I didn't mean to go in blackface. Okay, I didn't mean to kill that guy. But it's like the intention of I didn't really mean to do that. Well, just look on the internet. It's why it's there, and you will see. If you type in drow, it might be the third or fourth search thing, like how to make drow and not look like you're in blackface, or drow sometimes is misconstrued as being in blackface. That just in this day and age, there's really no excuse for screwing it up. But I'm still kind of conflicted about it, being the costume person that I am.
Yeah, at Games on Demand at Gen Con, there's a booth right next to us, and they have 2 or 3 people in drow blackface walking by every hour, and it never stops being weird. And I just look over there and I wonder, have you guys just not seen the D&D community episode that all the rest of us saw, where Ken Jeong shows up in drow blackface, and then
That was a deep reference.
Yeah, and then like the racist character shows up and is like, why is this guy in blackface? Like, we've all seen that, but I thought we had all seen that. But on the subject of different colors being available, over in the document, I put a link to the cover of the first edition of the Crystal Shard, the first book that had Drizzt Do'Urden in it. And if you're following along at home, you can Google that now, and you'll see there's 3 people on the cover. There's a human barbarian, tall, white guy. There's a dwarf, also, short, white guy, axe, shield, and so forth.
Beard.
And then there's this, big beard. And then crouching on the ground, it's weird, there's this Mexican guy in a cloak with white hair. And you look over, you're like, who could that possibly... Oh my god, that's Drizzt! Oh my god, that's Drizzt. And then, and it seems weird, but then you look at the drow blackface, and then you look back, you're like, nope, come back, Mexican Drizzt. All is forgiven. All is forgiven. It's okay.
So I understand that you would like to start the tradition of Mexican Drizzt.
Yeah, I always do either Mexican or Basque drow now on.
I really like this.
So,
Wait.
So this is a great time to promo another creator's works, Quinn Murphy.
Yeah.
He posted about drow. So if you search for Quinn Murphy drow, D-R-A-U, he has his own spin on the drow, sort of. I guess taken by like what people like, or what he doesn't like, or etc., or what he would like to do better. Taking some parts of that and just making a different fiction of like, oh, here's another different weird subterranean, semi-questionable elf culture, and it's great. It's a remix of drow, as you might know them from D&D fantasy stuff, into something else that's really interesting and gameable.
Excellent. Now, for those following along at home, I will be, whenever we upload the video, we'll have all these links in the show notes so that whenever it comes up, you can look at this as well. So I'll definitely make sure to include Quinn's post on that, because that sounds like something I would like to read, actually. We are getting towards the end of our time, so I just wanted to take a few minutes, even though it feels to me like we could keep talking about this for a while. Like we have just started to ease into the very beginning of this subject, which this is a 101 panel. And hopefully there will be a 201 panel where we can continue this discussion and maybe get into more subjects like the depiction of the drow and other games and playing. But for now, I was just wondering, we can go around if people want to give a little bit about something maybe you're currently working on or a project that you've finished, as well as where people can find out more about you on that internet that Julia mentioned being so damn convenient and available to give us information. So, Andre, do you want to go first?
Well, yeah, like I said at the top of the segment, my next thing that's being published is a quick start called Children of Perdition that should be available next month in the Fate Codex from Magpie Games. I'm currently also working on a Fate fantasy game with, well, you know, it's right now it's kind of development limbo, but that's the way things go. And as for where more can be found out about me online, I'm kind of a ghost when it comes to social media. So I appear and disappear.
That is totally okay, and there is no judgment if you do not have social media you'd like to share and enable people to like obsess over your Instagram or anything. It's totally okay. But I will.
You know,
yeah.
I was going to say, you know, I know there's a large following out there, people who want to see my dinner meal.
You might be surprised. That's totally creepy. But I will include links for the Fate Codex pieces that you have coming up. Dev, what about you?
Yeah, so I am DevP on Twitter, and also I'm on with my full name on Google+. You may need to drop me a note to know who you are if I don't know you to friend you, but I have been known to post there. And I want to mention my wife and game design partner's name, Laura Simpson. She's working on Companion's Tale, which will definitely be kickstarted real soon. But I'm very excited about that, and I'm helping her, and I get to see some of the art, and it's the best art. So yeah, Companion's Tale, a map-making story game by Laura Simpson.
Excellent. I will, because Laura is part of the Diversity Plus team, I will make sure to include all of the links to Laura's stuff as well. And Julia?
Let's see. I've been doing a lot of Kickstarter stuffs. So I will send you those. Can you hear that? I'm sorry.
I can. That was interesting.
That was really weird. Okay, well, it means that's the evening prayer. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So, yeah, lots of Kickstarter stuff, and I've totally lost my train of thought. I have been a bit of a recluse because I'm in grad school. So I can't even think of what all is, but I can send you all the links to a lot of the Kickstarter stretch goal things that I've been doing. And you can find me on Twitter, although be forewarned that I don't really check it very often, maybe once or twice a month. It's Queen of Pirates with of spelled O-V. And you can find me on Facebook and Google+. I'm the only Julia. No, I'm not the only Julia Ellingboe, but I'm the only non-blonde Julia Ellingboe. So.
I will include those links for you. Now, I just want to check real quick. Are there any last thoughts before we sign off for the day? Nope.
Thanks for this great talk.
Yeah.
No real cost.
Thank you for doing this.
Oh, thank you guys so much for doing this with me. I am pretty excited that we got such a fantastic panel together. But since we're at the end of our time, Andre, Dev, and Julia, thank you so much for participating. I really mean that. This was very awesome. And thank you to everyone who watched or is watching after the fact. If you like this, please watch the other great content on Indie Plus and our programming on Diversity Plus. You can find this on the Indie Plus playlist, which is linked in the notes below, and you can also subscribe to Indie Plus by clicking that subscribe button wherever it has moved on the screen. So all this goodness will show up for you as we post it. You can also join our G Plus community, where there's a lot of exciting talk and more events about tabletop RPGs. Thanks again, and everyone say goodbye to the internet.
Bye, Internet.
Bye, Internet.
Good night, Internet.